Good Wednesday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. Browns back out on the practice field in Berea. Getting ready to head to Philadelphia. We say this every week. Another game they have to have, 1-4 on the year, and headed to face the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, Chase Daniel, former NFL quarterback, with what he sees as the Browns situation with Deshaun Watson. This from FS1's The Facility.
I'm a quarterback, and I walk into the huddle to call a play, and I have 10 other men, my kids, grown men looking at me. I want them to feel inspired by the way I'm calling a play, by my temperament, by my body language, by everything I say. And I can tell if you're not inspired. Deshaun Watson has to walk in that huddle and see these left tackle or this running back go, oh, man, he's calm. All right, he messed up this play. That doesn't fly. So on the field, I cannot say one thing that he's doing well. This Browns offense is ranked 30th or worse in every major category. Okay, then I go to Kevin Stefanski, who's the head coach, two-time coach of the year. Okay, you don't think he wants better? Andrew Berry, GM, you don't think they know better? Their hands are tied in this situation. It is 100% ownership of the Cleveland Browns that are making the decision to play Deshaun Watson because
not the coach.
No, they are paying him $230 million. They don't want to look like fools like they have in the past with that viral Browns video.
With that, let's welcome in Sam Monson from the 33rd Team, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Sam, when I hear that, my initial reaction was, if they keep trotting Watson out and the offense looks like it does, aren't they still looking foolish?
Yeah, they are. And I think it's definitely possible that this is all driven by ownership and they are simply not permitted to bench Deshaun Watson given what they gave up to get him. It's also possible that they're looking at it and they just refuse to eat that kind of sunk cost. You know, they are stuck with him. It's a giant contract. It's fully guaranteed. They are paying that sum of money come what may. So they might be looking at this and are simply refusing to give in yet. You know, it hasn't worked out yet. They're trying to figure out a way of making it work. They're trying to get Deshaun Watson back to wherever he was previously or just somewhere near that. And they are not yet willing to throw in the towel because the second they do bench him, it is effectively an admission, not only that that was a mistake, but that they're going to have to endure more pain somewhere down the line in terms of cutting him, the giant dead cap hit that's coming down the line if that happens. So it's possible it's ownership. I think it is also possible that they just don't want to go there yet.
Yeah, I mean, at some point in time, the season's teetering, and it's only teetering because you got a bunch of AFC games coming up. But the way you've played, how can you think you're going to go out and beat, the Bengals and the Ravens and the Steelers and the teams that are, 3-2, 2-3? Yeah, this offense, I watch it every week. Is it as bad from the outside as it looks from the inside?
Yes. The short answer is yes. And look, if it wasn't for the contract and the trade that they gave up to get Deshaun Watson, I think it would have happened already. Regardless of whether it's ownership driven, it was a move that would have been made if it was purely a footballing decision and we didn't have this unprecedented contract and one of the biggest trades in NFL history to contend with. They would have sat him down because it's not working. And there have been flashes. It hasn't been universally terrible this season. The results have been, but it's not all been Deshaun Watson's fault this year. He's been bad for a couple of the games, but a couple of weeks ago, Watson actually played okay, and everybody else let him down for a change. There was an 80-something yard touchdown to Amari Cooper taken off because of a holding call, a fairly weak holding call at that. But that was a game where everybody else was letting down Deshaun Watson. But the point is, overall, it's not working. It's not going in the right direction. We're not seeing incremental improvements. They are kind of lost in the tall grass in terms of trying to find a scheme that is working for him or that will work for him. And it's taken them away from the things that did work in the offense under previous quarterbacks. And now they're just sort of lost. It's this directionless offense where nothing is working.
All right, as you can imagine, Browns fans have a lot of opinions. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yes, I've been a Browns fan for 50 years now, and Kevin Stefanski ain't just lost the locker room. He's lost the team. That team is not coached well. You can tell. They're disoriented all the time on the field. It is time. He's been there 4 years. The Jets just got rid of Robert Saleh. We might as well get rid of Kevin Stefanski.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. I don't know about lost the team. I do think there's a lot of penalties. I wouldn't fire Kevin Stefanski. I think he'd be hired, he'll be hired within the next coaching cycle. Having said that, they need to play better. I mean, you've gotten the team from really bad to mediocre. It's always harder to go from mediocre to consistent playoff team. And that's where this franchise is. You got to go from mediocre to year in, year out playoff team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, we are talking about somebody that's won Coach of the Year multiple times. If you believe that this is a decision foisted upon him from above, and Stefanski, if it was his call, would make the switch tomorrow to Jameis Winston, then you can't hold him responsible for it. Really, it's not his call. Like, even if he's lost the team in the locker room, those guys have checked out and they're not buying in. It's because of the quarterback. It's because they don't believe that they're being given the best chance to win by the quarterback that's starting, which again is not Kevin Stefanski's decision if that's what you believe. So if that's the case, I don't think Stefanski deserves to be held responsible for it. If, however, it is his call and Stefanski is the guy saying, no, we're going to keep persisting with Watson, we can fix this, then it is the kind of decision that should have consequences and cost him his job ultimately. Like, that would be him tying himself to this reclamation project of Watson and ultimately failing. So my assumption would be it's probably not his fault and I wouldn't hold him responsible for it. But if the ownership knows different, if they are aware that this is his decision, then it is the kind of decision that can cost somebody their job.
Yeah, and the one thing to remember, owners never fire themselves. That's it. That's the thing to remember. All right, and along those lines, fewest yards per pass attempt this season, minimum of 50 attempts. That's from the NFL on CBS. Bryce Young, the aforementioned benched quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, 4.81. Deshaun Watson, 4.84, and Jacoby Brissett, 5.15. Those are not the company you want to be keeping if you are a starting quarterback.
Absolutely. I mean, Bryce Young was playing badly enough that they had to bench him, not even for his own good, but just to figure out what else was going on with the offense. And I think there are some parallels there with Cleveland. The offensive line is banged up. It's not playing particularly well. The passing game isn't working. The run game isn't working. But now we don't know how much of that is Deshaun Watson and how much of that is the scheme sort of losing its way, trying to find the right course. At some point, you need to figure out what else is going on. And the way of doing that is to make a change of quarterback and establish a better baseline or a different baseline and just get an idea of how bad is your offensive line? How bad is your run game? Can we get the offense back to where we think it should be schematically and then work from there again? I think that is the problem, or one of the problems that persisting with Deshaun Watson creates is you now lose the ability to accurately judge the other components within that offense. And that's the territory that they're in right now, is an inability to judge anything else.
Yeah, and it's kind of why you look at it and they don't have an identity and everything's a mess, and I'm with you. This again, will show you just how rough it's been offensively. Commanders had 8 plays of 20-plus yards on Sunday. The Browns had just 1. So now Cleveland has just 12 plays all season long of 20 or more yards. Just 12 plays. That will tell you how mightily this offense is struggling.
Yeah, and this week in particular was the biggest indictment of that, I think, because not only are you contrasting that against a rookie quarterback who's carving up, your defense and putting up those big explosive plays, but the Commanders' defense is terrible. The Commanders' defense is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. If you can't look good against that defense, you're going nowhere. You are struggling and something needs to change, and it's only made look worse by the direct contrast against Jaden Daniels, a rookie, doing it against a better defense. So I think was a very, very bad game for this offense. That should have been a game where the offense was able to look better, and then we would have been stringing together one good performance from Watson with another game where the offense looked better, and we would almost be talking ourselves into maybe this thing is taking baby steps in the right direction. But instead, the one glimmer of optimism was quashed immediately by a terrible performance against what is a bad defense.
So here's another thing that the Browns just keep getting more and more beat up. So this is players that did not practice today. Grant Delpit, concussion. Dante Foreman, ankle. Ronnie Hickman, ankle. James Hudson with his shoulder. Charlie Hewitt, that's the long snapper. They put him on IR. Posick with his knee. Denzel Ward with his hamstring. Additionally, Myles Garrett, David Njoku did not practice out on the field. Amari Cooper stretched and then watched. So here are some of the roster moves. I alluded to this. Charlie Hewitt on IR. Signed to the active roster, Rex Sunahara, that's to be the long snapper. Jeff Swaim, the tight end from the practice squad. Designated for return to practice, Maurice Hurst and Mahu Diabate, who were both on IR earlier in the year. And then signed to the practice squad, a safety and a defensive end. So, again, everybody's banged up. You see some of the names on that injured list, and the Browns are banged up. Nobody cares. You got to find a way to be effective, especially offensively.
Yeah, nobody cares, and they're not alone. A lot of teams are badly banged up at this point already in the season. It seems to have been a particularly attritional season so far through just the first kind of month. There's a lot of teams that are really deep into the depth chart already at various spots. And yeah, it's going to have an effect, but it doesn't explain everything. And that's their issue is, it's not helping. If this was the best roster in the NFL, top to bottom, and those guys were 100% healthy and it was just the offense dragging everything down, sure. But the injuries are just making a bad situation worse.
Sam Monson from the 33rd Team, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out. We head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones. Diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Sam Monson, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I want to talk about Paul DePodesta. Ever since he has been with this organization, there has been questionable decisions. I saw a stat that says since 2016, the year he was hired, the Browns are 48 wins, 87 losses, and 1 tie. 1-2 in the playoffs. And Haslam has spent the most money in the league by far since that time. How can a guy who runs the team remotely, by the way, in San Diego, have so much sway and power? I mean, obviously, I'm not in the building, so I have no clue how much authority he truly has, but it does seem like he has a firm grip on this organization, and he is choking the life out of this team. I mean, how do you feel about him? Am I wrong, or there's just not enough information about him to make an opinion? Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Sam, DePodesta is he's the money ball guy. He's an analytics guy. I don't know for certain how much credence he's given. I've heard he's given a fair amount. Again, if it's analytics, they're looking for data that backs up their decisions. It's not like they're looking at it and going, this is it. They're looking for justification for the decisions they're making. That's what, in my mind, analytics and DePodesta would be doing.
Yeah, and even if you extend it into roster construction and drafting and all those other areas as well, nobody is batting 1,000. Everybody makes mistakes. People talk about Howie Roseman, upcoming opponent, with the Eagles, how he might be as good as it gets in the NFL in terms of strike rate and making good decisions and doing what people give him credit for. And yet he makes mistakes. The Eagles have drafted players that haven't worked out. They've sign money to people that haven't worked out. Nobody is nailing every single pick. The question is, are you improving relative to expectations, relative to the average? If you rewind a month, we were saying this Cleveland Browns roster is one of the best in the NFL coming into the season. Top to bottom, it is a top tier roster. And that's despite trading away a ton of draft picks for Deshaun Watson. It really all comes down to that one big decision. And we don't know how much DePodesta pushed that, was involved in that, how much that was his doing. If it is, I mean, obviously that's the biggest indictment you could have. And that itself is enough to remove a guy from the organization, that kind of swing and miss. But if they were getting average quarterback play this year, this team would be a good football team and be, in contention in the AFC. And I don't think anybody would be criticizing him at all. So that's really what it boils down to, is one massive swing of the bat that they took organizationally that has been a complete whiff.
So Deshaun Watson met with me today, asked, how do you get this offense on track?
Just finding those adjustments, finding those things that we, want to do and be perfect at those. And just make the game simple. Don't try to do anything more than what we seen before or what we trying to do. We just simplify the game as much as possible so we can go out there, execute, and play fast and not put too much thinking into the game.
When I heard him say that, I'm like, yeah, they aren't playing fast at all on offense. Everything looks like it's taking time to process, which is the worst thing you can have for an NFL, especially offense.
Yeah, but that's also always the way that he's played the game. He's never been a quarterback that is going to get the ball out of his hands lightning fast and, a sort of Drew Brees style of quarterback where he's one of the fastest average time to throw, or Tua Tagovailoa right now. That offense of Miami is ahead of the chains. When he's there, it's getting the ball out of his hands incredibly quickly. It's playing with anticipation. That's never really been the way Watson has played the game. He's always held onto the ball. Read it out on the fly during plays. It's always been a system that relies on him making the right decision at some point during the play and buying time. And now none of that is working. So it just does look slow and behind the chains and a step behind the defense. And that's the reality of it. It's true. That's exactly what's happening.
When you look at it, the quarterbacks that when the Browns acquired Deshaun Watson, they were trying to get Russell Wilson. He ended up going to the Broncos. Aaron Rodgers was another one that was mentioned in that. He went to the Jets. I know there's the instance of the trade for Matthew Stafford. Is there a cautionary tale here, though, that if somebody is willing to give up a quarterback who is a starting quarterback, there's usually a reason they're willing to move on from him?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you extend it to the draft, some of the biggest trades in NFL history have all happened in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and almost all of them have been unmitigated disasters for the team that traded for that quarterback. You're right to identify Matthew Stafford as the one exception to that. I would say that's been a win for both teams. The Rams got their Super Bowl. Stafford did push them over the top, but the trade also kind of catalyzed the Lions rebuild and put them into being one of the best teams in the NFC right now. It hasn't materialized in a Super Bowl yet, but I think it's been a win for them. They've moved forward with that trade. But you look at the Russell Wilson trade, absolute disaster. The trade for Aaron Rodgers so far has been a disaster. Obviously the move for Deshaun Watson has been a disaster. The 49ers trading essentially 3 first-round draft picks for Trey Lance hasn't worked at all, and they lucked out because they discovered Brock Purdy with the last pick of a draft. And then Bryce Young, the Carolina Panthers, trading everything they did to get up to number 1 and took him. all of these massive moves for quarterbacks driven by the need to have a star, the need to have a difference maker at that position, have almost all resulted in just a catastrophe of an outcome.
Yeah, and the Browns probably one of the worst of all of them because they were so desperate for a quarterback with the Deshaun Watson trade. Sam Monson and I can step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. Talk a little bit more about Deshaun Watson, start looking at the Eagles, Browns' opponent come Sunday. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Sam Monson from the 33rd team, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. Chris Canty from ESPN on the Browns quarterback situation with Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson, even though physically he might not be what he once was, there's still a way to quarterback this team in order to have success. Hell, we saw it last year with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, 38 years old last year, stepped in and guided his team to the playoffs.
He was Netflix and chilling.
Yeah, I mean, he prompted Kevin Durant on Sunday to say, you can put Flacco anywhere except the New York Jets, and he gonna hoop. And that's the most maddening part, Ev, and this is probably why I can't look at Stefanski or Andrew Berry, their general manager, as sympathetic figures in all of this. Because even though the owner is the one that has to say on whether or not Deshaun Watson is going to play, the owner is not meddling when it comes to the backup quarterback. The owner didn't tell you, oh, you got to get rid of Joe Flacco and bring in Jameis Winston when it costs you the same money. That is on the GM and that is on the head coach. They did not want to deal with the headache and the tension that it could create in that locker room if Deshaun Watson started the season the way that he did and the rest of the guys are looking at Joe Flacco.
Fair.
And to that concern, you know what I would say? That's what the money's for. That's why I'm paying you, general manager. That's why I'm paying you, head coach. You deal with it.
Yep.
You deal with it. You sold your soul to Deshaun Watson, and then you got rid of the only viable alternative that you've had in the building since Deshaun Watson showed up at quarterback, which was Joe Flacco.
And Sam, I defended the move not to re-sign Flacco when they did it because I thought it would have created some drama and dysfunction that you didn't need in the locker room. When it's laid out that way, it's tough to argue with Chris Canty's rationale.
Yeah, except it's here already. It's here anyway. It's not like that avoided the drama of we're already. I mean, 2 weeks into the season, there were people out there calling for Jameis Winston to start over Deshaun Watson. You know, we've got to bench him. We've got to turn to Jameis. It didn't avoid that. It might have avoided the specific of, hey, Joe Flacco, but if it did anything, it kicked the can down the road for a couple of weeks. They still brought in a backup with starting experience, a guy who's thrown for 5,000 yards in the NFL, a guy that is a viable option to start games over a season and start a season's worth of games. So I don't really buy the idea that it avoided this terrible situation and drama and a potential locker room split of people wanting a change at quarterback. All it did was change the name. It just changed that the object of desire as the backup quarterback from Joe Flacco to Jameis Winston. But it's the same problem. It's the same dynamic.
Yeah, and again, Winston is a lot like Joe Flacco. Big arm, going to put the ball in harm's way, going to make big plays, and going to turn the ball over. So, I get it. All right, let's turn our attention to the Eagles. Deshaun Watson asked what he has seen from this Eagles defense when he looks at it.
It's a big physical front, fast, athletic, and they just try to create as much destruction as they possibly can to get to the quarterback in the run game. So definitely another challenge for us to be able to go out there and it's going to be fun for us to be able to go compete with those guys because that's a fun group to compete with.
Sam, when I look at it, the Eagles are a lot like the Browns. They like to get after it and create havoc, which that sounds like not a great matchup for things, the way this Browns offensive line is played.
Yeah, though Philadelphia's defensive line has underachieved this year, relative to expectations, relative to where they needed to be, and to the sort of historical success of that Eagles defensive line. They have usually, been able to roll 7 deep of elite level defensive linemen, pass rushers, impact playmakers, and they're a lot thinner this year. They're a lot weaker generally, and they haven't been destroying teams the way they have in the past with that defensive front and those 4 guys up front. Jalen Carter, the second-year defensive tackle, he's the guy that has the potential to be that kind of all-pro superstar, but he hasn't done it every single game. So it's potentially a bad matchup for Cleveland if those Eagles players all hit and all play at the kind of level that I think they're capable of, between proven ability in Jalen Carter and sort of theoretical ability in these high draft picks. But they haven't played at that level consistently. So, it's a group that Cleveland could potentially hang with if they're able to, play their better game in terms of offensive line and blocking. Guys like DeJuan Jones is not necessarily overmatched by this group.
So the other thing is the Eagles' wide receiving core has been banged up. A.J. Brown missed a bunch of games. Devontae Smith had concussion. Both of them are expected to play. You add in Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Eagles struggled mightily early. There was that was a mess early. Have they started to figure things out, do you think?
Yeah, well, they've been forced to kind of pivot and run the offense through different players. A.J. Brown should be back. Devontae Smith, I believe, is still in the concussion protocol. So he might be cleared, but he still needs to get over a couple of hurdles before he does get himself back on the field from that hit that he took. But without those 2 guys, the offense is basically run through Dallas Goedert, the tight end, and Saquon Barkley in the backfield. They've had to construct a very different offense. And yeah, I think it's been encouraging that they have been able to do that. And they are capable essentially of force feeding the ball to whoever the best players are on the field in a given moment, whether it is their wide receiver duo or if they're reduced to Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. So that part I think is encouraging. Jalen Hurts has made an absolute ton of mistakes so far this season. He's leading the league, I believe, in turnover-worthy play rate, putting the ball in harm's way essentially more often than any quarterback in football. That has to change if this team really does want to be a contender. But yeah, I think it has been slowly moving in the right direction for them.
All right, when you look at this, obviously 1-4, the Browns need a win desperately. What does it look like for them to get a win against a Philadelphia Eagles team in Philly?
I mean, their defense, I think, needs to play well, needs to take advantage of those Jalen Hurts mistakes. But obviously, the offense is where all the focus is, and they need a mistake-free game. They've shown that it might not be explosive, it might not be devastating, but they can at least score. They can at least make some plays happen, but they can't take them away by mistakes and penalties and getting beat on the offensive line. So it's going to take a game where the entire unit tries to avoid the types of mistakes that they've had so far this season. It plays a much cleaner brand of football.
Have you been surprised at all the missed tackles and the defense of the Browns' inability to stop the run? That's got to be concerning when you got Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley up next on the schedule.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been an issue. Last season, the defense, even though it was playing spectacularly, was always a little bit boom or bust. And I think it is potentially a side effect of the type of aggressive defense that they play is you're going to give up some big plays. They also they added a bunch of pass rushers. They added some speed, some agility, some additional threats in terms of pressure to Myles Garrett, who'd obviously been the one superstar for years. But they haven't beefed up the run defense as much as those pass rushers. So that is an area on paper where you look at it and say, they don't necessarily have that dominant space-eating defensive tackle that a lot of other teams do it is an area of weakness on paper, and it's becoming an area of weakness on the field as well.
Sam Monson, 33rdteam.com. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks so much, Sam.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Sam Monson, make sure you check him out, 33rdteam.com. He is also co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jake Burns from Cleveland Browns Film Breakdown. Straight ahead. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Brian Baldinger, former NFL offensive lineman, does really good film breakdowns. Here is an analysis with Deshaun Watson from the Commanders game.
If you just wanted to see one play right here, to see the type of season that Deshaun Watson in Cleveland is having, it's this one. First down at the 7. Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy are going to run this crosser in the middle of the field. And really, that's all Deshaun needs to be looking at. You can't get any better protection. You're standing back there on a postage stamp and nobody's near you. And all you're doing is reading this mesh. And as soon as Washington doubles Amari Cooper and they leave Jerry Jeudy wide open, that's the throw. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. You run, whether you're in man or zone right here. I don't know if Washington even knows what they're in. But there's Jerry Jeudy with his hand up waving. And the quarterback does this. And you watch this and you go, why? Why? I mean, here it is. It's just this easy. Like, here it is in the middle of the field. Jeudy and Amari. All right, what are they doing? That's all you need to be looking at. As soon as Washington does that, there's the throw with Jeudy up, hand up in the air. Like, Deshaun has to make this throw. Like, you can't miss this. This is a gimme. It's a layup. But this is the worst thing that can happen. You sack yourself and you get crushed. You get chin music right there from Dorrance Armstrong. And it's totally unnecessary. I don't know what Judy's thinking about, but I'm sure he's frustrated.
With that, let's welcome in Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Jake, I know you kind of looked at that same play. Obviously, it's a concern, just not seeing what is there.
Yeah, there's unfortunately some worse examples from that game. And I think the way I've tried to look at this or frame it out is that there's a lot of time that Deshaun Watson missed that I think we forget about, right? We forget that he sat out the entire 21 season. We forget that he sat out most of 22, maybe more than the Browns expected because the suspension was longer than anticipated originally. And then we know last year he only played in 5 games. And when you add up missed time with a quarterback trying to get back into the rhythm of what it takes to be successful in the NFL, and a guy who already is a known delayed processor, you get into the situation we're in where he hasn't played enough football. His offensive line, we can all agree, has not been good enough, hasn't been up to the standard this year. But then when things are going well around him, things are blocked up, things are where they need to be, he doesn't trust what he sees. The game is moving fast. He's not able to process it. He's worried more about running because he thinks pressure is going to be in his lap every single play, and that leads to a severely fractured offense. If your quarterback thinks on every snap, drop back base snap, that I have to create and try to extend the play, you're never going to be able to see things within the means of what the play design is, at least not consistently. You might pick up one first down, but then you got to get another and you're going to fail. So I think that the way I would frame it is that Deshaun Watson is a fractured quarterback mentally, and I don't think he can play at a successful level. It's like a rookie quarterback because, again, he's missed so much time that it's almost equivalent to a rookie quarterback who is being demolished by a bad offensive line in front of him, and they lose trust. They lose belief. Even guys are open. The answer is right in front of their face, and they don't want to believe what their eyes are seeing. That's where we're at, and why I have such skepticism that the status quo with Watson and the process at hand is going to get better in the immediate future. And that is it's a dark place to be right now, considering that they're 1-4.
Yeah, and I can't argue with any of that. So Browns beat reporter Daryl Rotter tweets this out. So we've seen an entire season of Deshaun Watson, 9-8, 60% completions, 19 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. 12 interceptions is obviously concerning. The sacks are more concerning. Net yards gained per attempt. The thing that I would say, fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. That's how you measure an elite quarterback. And I don't think you can say he's elite. And I was a guy that defended him. What I'm seeing now with an offense that's trying to tailor it around him, I can't argue with anybody that wants to say that.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to like hammer the point home here. I mean, you mentioned you can't say he's elite. I mean, I think we're having people argue whether he's just competent enough to even play. Like, I think that's, the point at which we're at, where he is so inconsistent that he's not able to continually do what he needs to do to hold up his end of the bargain to just be a guy you can win with. I mean, obviously, the trade was made and the deal was provided based on the thought that he was a guy you would win because of, right? Like that's the reason you give quarterbacks big money. Typically, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you pay quarterbacks north of $200 million because they are guys who you can win because of. They make the plays. They drag everybody along, and he is not that. And it's to the point now, if you look at the CPOE data and you look at the EPA, which is expected points added on a drive-by-drive basis, throw-by-throw, whatever metric you want to go to, and it's telling you he shouldn't even be playing. She is one of the worst active quarterbacks playing right now. And while I think some of that is a bit more team-driven, if you look at the grade-based data, he's kind of hovers in the 20s. He's nowhere near what they anticipated getting when they made the trade that they made, or they wouldn't have made it, obviously, for several different reasons now. So gone are the conversations of can the Browns get 2020 Deshaun Watson back? And I think the conversation that is happening now and what they're trying to solve and what we are trying to kind of prepare people for is like they're trying to figure out if they can just win with him. Can he be a piece of the puzzle that you can fit in the next few years so that you don't have to waste a significant amount of money? Can he fit into the machine and be a part of keeping it moving? Because if he is the part of the machine that doesn't keep the locomotive moving, he's the reason it keeps stopping. He's not doing his job. Then it gets to the point you have to have the really hard conversations about benching him or replacing him. And then ultimately, maybe at the end of the season with a post June 1st designation, cutting him before next season. That's it. I think again, it's getting beyond where we were starting the season at, which is like, hey, can Deshaun Watson be a top 8 quarterback again? I think that's obvious he can. It's not there. It's not, and maybe it comes back, but it's hard to see a guy crossing the 30-year-old threshold who survives on making plays out of structure. It takes a lot of sacks and has throughout his career survived on overcoming those sacks and those negatives by making heroic plays downfield, usually outside of structure. And that's not a part of who he is anymore. And honestly, seeking out those opportunities is actively hurting this offense, right? Like, I think a way to frame it is when young quarterbacks come in, Dave, they are tasked with finding the answer, right? Every time a quarterback drops back, you hunt out the answer. And if Jaden Daniels is a perfect example of that. Every drop back, he might not have the answer. And what I mean by that is the right throw to the right person based on the coverage or based on what unfolds. That's the answer. But can you create a different answer? Can you use your legs to run out, scramble, throw downfield, make a play? Can you do something to extend the play, make an answer possible, right? You have an answer provided usually, but if there's not one, can you be the provider of a different answer? That's not happening the way it did for young Deshaun Watson. Older Deshaun Watson, slower, beat up, shoulder issues, live and arm as it used to be. and a guy who can't live from the pocket, consistently finding the throws and people he needs to find. And then also you add in an offensive line that's beat up and not doing its part consistently, you can very clearly understand why this is one of the worst. I mean, it is the worst offense in the NFL right now.
All right. As you might guess, a lot of voicemails. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin County. They just can't say what the real problem is. The real problem is personnel. The team, as it is constituted now, is too old, and they're not good. The people they have on the line are awful. And I, again, blame the people on the top, okay? You know, Mr. Dorsey, the man who put the team together, and they were great, and Stefanski inherited. So how many Pro Bowlers do we have? You know, say 5 from 5 drafts from Mr. Berry. Look at the line from Mr. Berry. Look at all the receivers they've drafted that have gone nowhere. Look at the defensive line draft picks. I mean, it's as simple as they probably need to bring back John Dorsey or someone, and basically they need new bodies, they need new personnel, and you really can't fix this. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Comparing Dorsey and Andrew Berry's drafts, John Dorsey was picking in the first round, right? You're going to point to Baker Mayfield. I would counter that with you should have taken Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. Nick Chubb was a good pick. Relative to the wide receivers, they keep taking them in the third round. Those are 25% hit rates. He did get Delpit, he did get JOK, so there's been good picks. There's been bad picks too. I think the roster is pretty good. It's magnified. Everything's magnified because the quarterback play's been bad and the offensive line play's been bad. They're hurt and banged up.
Right. I think that there's a world where we are sitting here at 1-4 and people think a total teardown needs to happen. I don't think that's the case. I think there's still clearly pretty talented players here. I think that there's a pretty significant argument that they're getting the worst out of them right now, but there's talent here. We've seen these guys win football games. So it's a matter of galvanizing the group to believe that they can win again. I think you would agree with me that when, and this is a touchy subject, but when Joe Flacco arrived, there was something about his general aura and the belief that came with Joe that lifted everybody up to think that they could win every game in the back end of that schedule. And that sort of belief is not happening right now. There's a lot of quit in these guys and a lot of disbelief that they have the ability to get it done. You cannot tell me that JOK and Za'Darius and Grant Delpit and Denzel, you know, Miles and a lot of other pieces, Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper, these guys they're proven to be NFL-worthy, talented players, but there's something missing. And it's not for me to know because I'm not inside the walls of Berea, but there's something missing. They need to solve whatever that lack of belief, wherever it is coming from, to get guys inspired to play a more consistent brand of inspired football. That is the difference. They're not playing hard enough or smart enough. And some of those things come with the belief that they can win every week. And some of those things come with like, hey, why do we pay NFL coaches? Well, we pay them to get guys to that point, right? And I think that is part of it too. I can't sit here and be like, well, they don't believe in Deshaun Watson that he can get it done. I don't know that. I don't know them well enough to know whether they know that, but I know that as the quarterback continues to struggle, sort of things start to add up and point in different directions. I think that that's pretty obvious. So I think if you can, you know, this is a kind of a different conversation, but as you're looking into the future and we're like, well, this team isn't talented enough. And I don't really buy that. I think that there's something that needs to happen to galvanize the group, but you're not that far off. Like you're not. I really don't think you're that far off. If you think every time the Browns fail to meet expectations that it needs torn down and rebuilt, then that you don't pay attention to the NFL. You don't. I mean, look at what Jaden Daniels is doing for Washington. Did Washington totally tear everything apart in the last year, 2 years? No, they haven't done that, right? And there's other turnarounds in the same fabric. So I don't think that you should go into this thinking they need to trade Myles Garrett or get what they can for him or whoever else. Like that's not the world you need to live in. If they draft a quarterback or sign somebody, or maybe hell, Jameis gets a chance to do it and it's better, that's all it takes. We watched it last year. This group was so beat up last year, so beat up across the board. And yet somehow that group galvanized and won games that maybe they didn't have any business winning because they started to believe. So The job of Kevin and the job of Jim Schwartz is to, how do we get these guys back to that? Because that's where they were last year. That was so impressive. You're telling me again that this team has gone in 365, less than that, days to being not good enough to win NFL games? That's not true. That's not true. And the personnel and the coaching staff hasn't changed. So what do we got to do to get back there? That's the question. What do we got to do to get back there? Does it need a spark from the quarterback change? Does it need a spark in a different play caller? Your job is to figure that out. So do that and get paid for it. Or there are dangerous conversations around the safety at which some of those jobs of important people are going to be retained, right? That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's life in the NFL without question. Jake Burns, BrownsFilmBreakdown.com, and I just step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. Be right back.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones. Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones. Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby tins. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
So I've been watching the Browns for several years now. Like last season, the Browns had a lot of quarterback issues and some offensive line issues as well. But they managed to get through it, and they managed to win with 5 quarterbacks. So what's the common denominator this year that they didn't have last year? And I think it's the offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator's got to go.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jake, I don't know. Something needs to change. The offense doesn't. Normally, I can tell what they're trying to do. This looks like some mad scientist's Frankenstein version of an offense, and I can't argue that it's not working. I don't know if you need to let Dorsey call the plays, Ken Dorsey call the plays, or do you try to go back to what Kevin Stefanski does better?
Yeah, I think the status quo is the problem. Like there's an idea for me as I watched some Buffalo early season tape the other day is they're doing a lot of what Ken wants to do and has done in his past. And that's as recent as last year before the Bills stuff came to an end. They're doing alignment, they're doing protection, they're doing schematic stuff in the way that he has done. Now there's some of what Kevin has traditionally done in there, but mostly this is Ken's process, I think is the way to say it. So, two things happen here. Kevin wants to be the long-term answer as a play caller. I understand that from a job security standpoint. I understand it from he just thinks he's the best person to do it, et cetera, et cetera. If you give him time, do I think Kevin can get better at it and figure it out? Sure. But I think you would agree with me looking outside in, this feels like a scenario where there should be a little more urgency to solve the failure that's happening right now. And if there's no urgency, then maybe that tells you that they have been promised to be around and their jobs aren't on the line, and Kevin can kind of grow into this a little bit, right? Like that could be it. Because if there's no urgency, I'm confused. Because much like you have said, and I said immediately after the post-game show on Sunday they cannot keep trying to put the pedal to the metal with what they're doing right now. Something has to change, whether that's Kevin going back, and it's not just Kevin, it's guys who have traditionally been in his system. Most of these guys have been doing what Kevin has asked them to do for years. Not all of them, but most of them. There are new faces, but not entirely. 70% of guys that have been here in the past. So going and reverting to a little bit more wide zone, a little bit more of that traditional Kevin Kubiak sort of stuff wouldn't be that hard to reverse course. And that's a place Kevin's more comfortable. If that's not what they want to do and they want to continue to go down this road they're traveling, I think having Ken call plays is better for Kevin's outlook as it is, because if Ken is more comfortable doing it, if they have adopted a large portion of what he wants to do, let him do it. Let him try it. See if that is the missing element of this whole operation. And maybe more of that is going on behind the scenes than we know. Maybe it's a bunch of Ken is feeding plays to Kevin, who passes them off to Deshaun. Like that could be the case. You never want to assume that something like that isn't happening. It's from all I understand with Dorsey on the sideline, he's pretty actively involved in what they're doing. So I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And if I were Kevin and again, I just don't know what the fabric of like what his job security is. If I was trying to do some self-preservation, I would put the onus on Ken to be the guy who's doing it good, bad, or ugly, so that you are less inclined to be the fall guy in that scenario. I just think from like, is this the right thing to do for the offense? If it's leaning heavily into what Ken has done, I mean, I don't really see why you wouldn't give him an opportunity based on we're really struggling. Why don't you take the leadership role on this on game days? Feels like something they should be considering, but I'm not sure. And I think we're left to do these sorts of shows and podcasts, et cetera, where we're reading tea leaves, and that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. So maybe there's going to be some action clarification in the next few hours when the team is going to kind of be out in front of the public again, or in the next month or so, that's going to tell us a little more about how guys feel about job security and things of that nature. But I just think, again, you're trying to galvanize these guys, and I think that something along those lines is not the worst idea to try to do.
All right, so this is interesting as well. This is from Warren Sharp Football, tweeting this out. Best havoc rates on defense. So this is rates of plays resulting in sacks, forced fumbles, interceptions, TFLs, or pass breakups. Giants are number 1 in the NFL. The Browns are number 2. Vikings 3, Niners 4. You see the Eagles, who play the Browns, are 7. That's not good based on what the offense has had.
Not great.
But I want to flip it and talk about the defense. What have you seen from the defense when you look at them on tape? I mean, everybody's kind of, there's missed tackles, there's all kinds of stuff like that. The defense has played not quite as good as they did last year, and not nearly as good as they're going to need to carry the offense.
I think this is the least talked about thing that should be talked about more. This defense is not playing well. And we can say what we want to say about the offense isn't helping them and et cetera, but that's not how the football world works. We're watching Pittsburgh go to 3-2. Very well could have been 3-1 if Dak didn't make a really great throw down there on the goal line. It could be 4-1, excuse me, based on their defense playing dominant football. The Browns offense, yes. Is there a correlation between how the offense is playing, how much a defense is on the field, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah, there is. There's some of that plays into this. But you are isolating the defense's play away from the offense. And when you're doing that, you know, the thing that's working best for the Browns defense is that this offense is so bad because they're getting ignored. The havoc rate is true. They do create some negatives. They do get their hand on the football here and there. Now, they're not creating as many turnovers as you would like. JOK did a nice job with this on Sunday, but generally speaking, they're not creating the turnovers that you would like. And some of that can regress to the mean if you're getting your hand on footballs and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'm not surprised by the havoc rate. They do create that. They're in constant pursuit of negative plays, which is good. Negative plays make things hard. The problem is they're giving up explosives and they're not tackling, period. And they're not doing their job consistently enough. And teams have a great feel for what they're going to do. They're one of 3 teams in the NFL right now who refuse to live in anything too high coverage. The NFL is being so dominantly run by defenses with too high coverage stuff that we're talking about goofy conversations about banning cover 2 defense. The Browns, the Cowboys, and I think the Vikings are the 3 teams that just don't care about that. They live in one high. They just want to play that all the time. They want to have a bunch of guys in the tackle box. They want to try to create negative plays by being aggressive, and they often don't disguise coverage. The Browns essentially refuse to disguise coverage. They are, I think, at the lowest or the second lowest rate of coverage manipulation pre to post. They don't do it. They don't really care to live in that world, which is so startling given how much evidence we have of how hard it is to play quarterback when the scheme goes from one thing you think pre-snap to the next thing post-snap. And that's just, it's amazing to me. So they have not done well with that. They've continued to be a one-high team, which they were last year. And there's really just a refusal to change. They talked in the offseason about wanting to add in a change-up. I watch a lot of their defensive film. I don't see much of it. I see much of anything that resembles like a change-up. And not that you're throwing your changeup as much as your fastball, but I mean, you're talking about maybe like, you know, one third of that. Like they're not doing anywhere near enough. And then you add in teams having a great feel for what they're going to do. Daniel Jones talked about it. There have been many teams, the Dak and the Cowboys talked about it, that have a great feel for what the Browns are going to do, and then being able to use those tendencies and what they're doing pre-snap to get into the best play possible. And then if you add on top of that the tackling issues, you can see where this is a problem. They have allowed the 8th most rushing yards per after contact per carry. So that's startling. They're not getting guys to the ground at the rate that you would hope. Overall, they've allowed the 8th most yards after catch in the NFL this year. So that's a rough thing to be in the bottom 10 of. Fourth most rushing yards allowed over expected per attempt. So that's a bottom 4 defense in getting guys to the ground. When a program thinks everything is fit up, you have a guy there, you should get them on the ground. They can't do it. They've allowed the most explosive runs in the NFL, over 25 yards. They've allowed, so the havoc rate stuff is good, creating negatives. But when you're giving up big plays on top of that, that cancels each other out. And honestly, I'd rather, get more bottled up situation where you're not allowing explosives rather than creating like a 4-yard loss. That's a different thing. Allowing a Jaden Daniels 40-yard scramble is different than just getting a 4-yard negative 2-yard situation, right? So they have 6 or fewer in the box at the highest rate in the NFL right now. So that kind of is weird, but they also have the highest rate of 8 men in the box. So they're just like either they're loading up in the box or they're playing with nobody in the box. And there are only 3 defenses that play in that single high usage. Like I said, Browns, Cowboys, Vikings. So they're telling you, hey, we're either loading up the box in cover 1, or when we play 2 safeties, we're not going to have anybody in the box. So they've allowed the second most explosive runs, like I said, 4th highest yards per run at 5 yards per run, and they're giving up explosive plays. So they're saved a little bit. I think they're 15th in EPA per play. They're like an average defense. And I think, Dave, you would agree with me, the conversation coming into this year was, hey, if the Browns can have an average to below average offense, not awful like they are right now, if they could have an average to below average offense with an elite defense, they got a chance. They got a chance to get to 10, 11 wins again. But what we're seeing is an awful offense mixed with a now average to below average defense. That is a formula for 2, 3, 4 win type of season. That's what we're in the middle of. The defense is getting ignored, passing blame to other people, et cetera, et cetera. There are teams in the NFL who are proving, even though your offense is bad, you can still find ways to win games by being a dominant defense. And the Browns are not leaning into that at all. They're not getting the job done on that side of the football. They're not tackling. They're not coaching it up well. And ultimately, it's leading to teams have a great feel for what to do against them and are finding solutions to the problem. And that's why the pressure's not impactful. They're not getting home enough. And, that's it. The quarterbacks are not having to think post-snap. They know where to go with the football. And you're wondering, like, okay, why aren't the Browns getting those ridiculous pressure numbers they've had over the, last year or even the year before that with Joe Woods? Well, they're not, quarterbacks aren't ham off and hold the football an extra half second or full second. They have an answer. They know where to go with it. They're not getting anything confused and muddied pre-snap to post-snap. And to me, that is the job of the modern defensive coordinator. Make quarterbacks hold on to the football. Because if you can do that, you have a chance to constantly, if you have really talented front four, win a bunch of snaps and ultimately get off the field pretty often. And, last year it was pretty good, largely because I think we look back on it, there were some scheduling advantages in terms of weather and then some quarterbacks that were coming into Cleveland to play. And that's just kind of like taking some things away from them. But they were good until teams have now like, oh, we've got a full season's worth of data on what Jim Schwartz likes to do. And that's where you saw like McVay torch them and some others, obviously leading into the Texans with CJ Stroud taking care of them dispatching them pretty easily. This is a concern. This is a concern. And I don't have an answer for how it gets better there because they're not providing any examples for how it does, which is a problem. So we're all negative talk today. That's where we're at.
Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com and I are going to take one more time out. Other side break, we continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Jake, how difficult would it be for the Browns to incorporate some of the things, especially in the run game, that they did last year? The Kevin Stefanski, if you will. Is it drastically different, or would it be easy enough to adjust and try to incorporate some of that to get the offense going?
Well, some of it would just be getting under center more. Like they have moved with Deshaun away from being an under center team as often as they have been in the past. So that would be the first step to doing more of what Kevin has done traditionally in the run game. I actually don't think that their run game from the gun has been that much different. I think they could do a little bit more gap concept stuff in terms of pulling guards for power and counter concepts. They could do more of that, but the gun stuff is never where Kevin has lived. So, what you're asking basically is, can they revert to being a higher volume under center team? And that is not, it shouldn't be that challenging to do, but it's a matter of, can they get the quarterback to buy into that? Can they process ways to have Ken be a big part of that? I think, again, if they get away from that, and maybe their under center rate is like, I think something in the high 20s, they're like a 75% gun team. If they move away from that, which I am a believer that they should try, because this status quo is not working, can they still get everybody to buy into that style? And, I don't think it's an impossible task. We see teams week to week come up with crazy game plans. So I don't feel like it should be that hard to do. But you have to be bought all into that, and it has to be something the organization is aligned with top to bottom. And I think that's where we start to question whether that is possible. And so maybe that's more of a coming out of the bye week thing. But again, I would be ripping the cord on so many of the way they're approaching these things. But I think, again, if you want it to feel more Kevin Stefanski from maybe years past, it involves having the center, the quarterback put his hands under center more often. And right now the Browns are passing it a ton, and they're like one of the highest teams, I think the second highest in pass rate in neutral run situations, like those situations that could be run or pass. They have the highest pass over expected rate right now, which is, again, these are total reversals in course for Kevin. So their rate of run is low. It would involve, obviously, reverting to a bit more under center, and then it would revert to running more on early downs, all of which is not that hard to do, but it's a matter of if they feel comfortable enough with, again, you're starting a right guard who's young, rookie, and DeJuan Jones is kind of like hanging by a thread, which is such a disappointment at this point. But do you think you can get buy-in from everybody to do that? I'm not sure. It shouldn't be that hard, but I don't have the ability to be optimistic about them doing that.
All right, where can folks find you? Again, normally Jake does film breakdown, not anything really to talk about this week. So where can folks find you, and tell us about it?
Yeah. So we're formed a community of people who enjoy this way to view the Browns, the scope by which we talk about them through a process over results angle, a film-based angle, and all of that. So yeah, man, we're growing every day. We're up over 2,000 subscribers at brownsfilmbreakdown.com. We're very excited about what that's turned into. We have an app that comes with the website and the membership that we have. So we're really excited about that. We have Monday and Tuesday night, we do exclusive film breakdowns, all 22, where we watch almost all of it and try to process it and talk through it together. So yeah, that's the location, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. And from there, you can easily sign up to be a part of what we're doing here. And we're excited about where it's going. Even the tough times, I think we can find ways to still enjoy this and find ways to find pathways out of the problems that they're in, or the outlook of, having a first round pick again and being a more active part of the early parts of the draft. We have conversations around that too. So that's where we're at. And then I'm at Jake_Burns18 on Twitter, and find myself to be pretty active there and Browns-based conversation. So thanks for having me, guys.
As always, appreciate it. Great stuff. Jake Burns, check him out, brownsfilmbreakdown.com. Always really good and insightful stuff. Breaks film down as good as anybody. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.